Is corn and soy free just another health scam? Well, yes and no. Corn and soy free has legitimate science to back it up. What animals eat, even when raised out on pasture, directly changes the fat composition of their meat and eggs, which then changes your metabolism. But then there are some companies just slapping corn and soy free on their labels who don't actually understand why corn and soy are problematic in the first place. So they remove them, charge you double, then replace them with sunflower oil, canola, or flax. These ingredients can be just as problematic and defeat the main purpose of why I choose corn and soy free. You're paying premium prices for the same metabolic damage, just with better marketing. As a farmer and metabolism health nerd obsessed with fatty acids, who custom formulates our livestock feed and tests the fatty acid profiles of what we produce, I've seen this firsthand. The corn and soy free movement contains some companies that are just chasing trends instead of solving problems. So today I want to show you the real science behind why feed matters, how the fat composition of our entire food system has shifted over the last 100 years, and why we've chosen the corn and soy free approach at Nourish Food Club and Angel Acres Egg Club with our custom made corn and soy free feed. The fatty acid composition of our entire food system has shifted dramatically over the last 100 years. To better understand this shift, we need to understand that there are three main types of fat: saturated fat, monounsaturated fat, and polyunsaturated fat, PUFAs. Now, every dietary fat that we consume contains a different balance of these three fats. And as we'll see, how an animal is raised and what it eats profoundly changes that balance. In 1900, PUFAs made up only 1 to 2% of our daily calories. Today, it's over 15%, with some estimates creeping as high as 20 to 25%. That means we've gone from eating a diet with a high saturated to unsaturated fat ratio, which sends very different metabolic signals, to one flooded with unsaturated fats. And this shift doesn't just affect what's on our plates, it literally changes us. Dietary fat isn't simply burned for energy, it's incorporated into our cells, our tissues, even our mitochondria, rewiring our metabolism from the inside out. And this comes with its consequences: slower metabolism, impaired energy production, more fat storage, fatigue, oxidative stress, compromised gut health, and less cellular resilience. This is the direct result of radically altering the fats in our food, and in doing so, we've altered ourselves. One of the biggest drivers behind the big fat swap is that we've replaced traditional fats like butter and tallow with industrial seed oils. But that's only part of the story. The feed we give livestock, especially chickens and pigs, has also dramatically altered the fats we now consume. The fatty acid profile of meat and eggs mirrors the fatty acid profile of the feed. In other words, what livestock eat directly determines how much PUFAs end up in their meat, milk, and eggs. Conventional chickens and pigs fed corn and soy-heavy diets produce fat that can closely resemble the fatty acid composition of canola oil. And while pasture-raised is certainly a huge improvement over conventional confinement, the PUFA content is still high in modern times. And why is that? Well, chickens and pigs are monogastrics, like us, with single stomachs, so they can't survive on grass alone. Unlike cows or sheep, they lack the complex 4-chamber digestive systems needed to thrive on 100% grass. While they do forage and gain nutritional benefits from insects, grasses, forbs, and sunlight, the bulk of their calories still come from concentrated feed. For pasture-raised laying hens and hogs, feed makes up 80 to 90% of their diet, with pasture only 10 to 20%. For broilers, meat birds, the feed percentage can be even higher, closer to 85 to 95%. So whether it's laying hens for eggs, broilers for chicken, or hogs for pork, pasture access matters for animal health, flavor, and nutrient diversity. But the feed still drives growth, production, and the fatty acid profile. So what livestock eat out on pasture still matters a lot. And here's what's often overlooked: the ingredients in that feed have changed dramatically over the last 100 years. Corn and soy dominate modern livestock feed. Both crops are heavily subsidized by the US government, meaning taxpayer dollars support their production. This makes them incredibly cheap to grow and buy, which is why they show up everywhere. from processed food to biofuels to animal feed, and are produced on an enormous scale. How enormous? Well, corn and soy now cover nearly 180 million acres of US farmland, about the size of California and Oregon combined. But here's the part that most people miss. Most of this doesn't actually feed people. 40% of US corn goes to livestock feed, 40 to 45% becomes ethanol for biofuel, 10 to 20% is exported, and only roughly 15% makes its way into food products like corn syrup, snack foods, and corn oil. For soy, the split is even more lopsided. 70% of US soy goes straight into livestock feed. Roughly 25% is exported, 5% or less becomes biodiesel, and only 6 to 7% is used directly for human food. And it's not as if we're talking about heritage varieties grown for nourishment. We're producing genetically modified, pesticide-treated commodity crops designed to fuel an industrial food system, not to support optimal animal health or human health. Soy, from paint to plate. It's important to recognize that soy is a relatively new addition to livestock diets. It was never a staple in traditional farming. Today, we produce more soy than at any point in history, reshaping our entire food system in the process. Before soybeans became a common feed ingredient, soy oil was actually mainly valued for industrial uses such as paint and varnish. Its high PUFA content made it ideal for these purposes because PUFAs readily oxidize and polymerize, allowing the oil to dry and harden effectively. Now, that doesn't sound like something we want to eat a lot of. Today, soy shows up in nearly every modern livestock ration, and not because it's the healthiest option for animals or humans, but because government subsidies made it cheap and abundant. Now, corn has a longer history in livestock feeding. It's been used in the US for over 150 years, but its role has shifted dramatically. In the 1800s, corn was mainly a seasonal supplement for finishing pigs and cattle, while animals still relied heavily on pasture. By the mid-20th century, hybrid and genetically modified corn varieties, mechanized farming, and subsidies made it cheap and abundant, fueling the rise of feedlots and replacing the forage-based diets of the past. Today, corn and its byproducts form the foundation of most industrial livestock diets, reshaping not only how we raise animals, but also the nutritional profile of the meat, milk, and eggs we eat. So how did we get here? The shift toward cheap corn and soy is rooted in post-war policy and industrialization. After World War II, the US repurposed its wartime industrial capacity for agriculture. Synthetic fertilizers developed for munitions and pesticides from chemical warfare research became tools for farming. By the mid-20th century, federal policy incentivized planting commodity crops like corn and soy through subsidies, designed to stabilize farm income and ensure cheap, abundant calories. Then came the Green Revolution of the 1960s and 1970s. Advances in hybrid seeds, chemical inputs, and mechanization, combined with government price supports, cemented corn and soy as the backbone of agriculture. The goal wasn't diversity, nutrient density, or soil health. It was maximum yield. And it worked. We built a food system optimized for cheap calories, processed food, livestock feed, and exports, not necessarily for optimal human health. Without these government subsidies, this mass production of corn and soy would not be possible. Now, relying heavily on modern corn and soy comes with its consequences. First, the chemical load. Over 90% of US corn and soybeans are Roundup ready, meaning they're genetically modified to tolerate glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup. This allows farmers to spray glyphosate directly on the crops without killing them. Most corn and soy used in livestock feed and therefore in our food system carries a significant load of pesticide residues and is genetically modified. Then there is the PUFA problem, polyunsaturated fats. What animals eat directly shapes the fat they produce. Soy in particular is a high PUFA feed ingredient, and feeding it to livestock raises the PUFA levels in their meat, milk, and eggs. To put it in perspective, soybeans are roughly 36% protein, which is valuable for animals. It's also 19% fat, 30% carbs, with fiber and minerals making up the rest. Of that fat, about 60% is polyunsaturated, 22 to 25% is monounsaturated, and only 15 to 16% is saturated. And more than half of that fat is linoleic acid, an omega-6 PUFA that causes metabolic disruption when consumed in excess. Now, truthfully, corn itself is less of a PUFA problem when in its whole kernel form. since it contains relatively little fat. Field corn used for livestock feed is roughly 4 to 5% fat, so the absolute PUFA contribution of whole kernels is smaller relative to soy. But livestock aren't just eating whole corn kernels, they're also fed concentrated corn byproducts, like corn oil and dried distiller grains, which are much more concentrated in fat and PUFAs, which is where corn becomes a bigger contributor to the PUFA problem. When done right, yes, it absolutely does. Switching livestock to a properly formulated corn and soy-free feed provides clear and measurable benefits for the animals and for us in the eggs and meat we consume. So let's break down 5 of the biggest benefits. First, lower PUFA content. PUFAs, polyunsaturated fatty acids, particularly linoleic acid, drive metabolic dysfunction when overconsumed. They steal oxygen required for optimal metabolism, interfere with carbohydrate oxidation, reduce energy output, and increase oxidative stress. Most livestock feed, including feed for pasture-raised animals, is loaded with high-PUFA ingredients like soy, corn, flax, and industrial byproducts. And here's the simple truth. PUFAs in equals PUFAs out. So the more linoleic acid in their feed, the more that ends up in their meat, milk, and eggs, and ultimately inside of us. Reducing PUFA intake means lowering the amount of these unstable fats that are incorporated into our own tissues. And given how dramatically modern diets have shifted toward omega-6s and all the PUFAs that we consume growing up, we don't need more of them silently reshaping our cellular makeup. Number 2, lower oxidation levels. PUFAs are chemically unstable due to their multiple double bonds. So when exposed to heat, light, or oxygen during cooking, processing, or storage, they oxidize, breaking down into toxic compounds like MDA, H&E, and other lipid peroxides, which can increase inflammation, disrupt metabolism, and contribute to cellular damage in the body. Research shows that meat and eggs with higher PUFA content oxidize faster, forming more of these harmful byproducts. So cooking PUFA-rich food accelerates this process, meaning you're not only eating more PUFAs, changing your own fat composition, but you're also eating more of their toxic breakdown products, ready to wreak havoc once ingested. One study showed that the higher the PUFA content in the raw meat, the more oxidation products form during cooking. Similarly, eggs higher in PUFAs were found to oxidize more easily, reducing their shelf life and compromising their nutritional value, flavor, and aroma. So by reducing PUFAs at the source, in the feed, you limit the raw materials that can degrade into these harmful compounds, both in the kitchen and inside your body. Number 3, fewer hormone-disrupting compounds. Hormonal imbalances are rising, infertility is up, testosterone is down, and breast cancer rates have increased by over 200% since 1970. While many factors are at play, endocrine-disrupting compounds are a growing concern. They're in personal care products, plastics, cleaning supplies, clothing, and now, in our food, even in eggs. And what's one major contributor? Phytoestrogens. These are plant compounds found in soy and flax that mimic estrogen in the body. While not identical to human estrogen, they're similar enough to bind to estrogen receptors and disrupt hormonal balance. This disruption can lead to estrogen dominance, a condition that interferes with thyroid function by reducing active thyroid hormone. Less thyroid hormone equals slower metabolism equals easier fat gain. So this makes sense why estrogen is sometimes used in the livestock industry as a fattening agent. Soy and flax are by far the most concentrated dietary sources of phytoestrogens. Soy, in particular, is loaded with isoflavones that are potent compounds that closely mimic human estrogen. And unfortunately, soy and flax are two staples of modern livestock feed. Flax especially so in many corn and soy-free rations and omega-3 enriched animal products. And research confirms that when pasture chickens are fed soy-based feed, these phytoestrogens are transferred into their tissues, especially in the liver and eggs, resulting in measurable levels in the final products we consume. So, you might be getting an unwanted dose of estrogen-like compounds every time you eat soy-fed eggs, chicken, or pork. In a world already full of estrogen-mimicking chemicals, plastics, personal care products, pesticides, cleaning supplies, cutting exposure in food is an easy, meaningful step toward hormone balance. Eggs don't need to be a source of phytoestrogens, so let's not make them one. Number 4, easier to digest. Many of our customers came to us unable to tolerate conventional eggs or pork. They experienced bloating, skin flare-ups, or digestive discomfort, symptoms that disappeared after switching to Angel Acres eggs and Nourish Food Club pork. Why? Well, first, the fatty acid profile is drastically improved. Our products contain significantly less omega-6 PUFA, which can negatively impact digestion. Diets high in linoleic acid, the primary omega-6 in soy and corn, is linked to gut inflammation, oxidative stress, and disruptions to the microbiome. This weakens the intestinal barrier, leaky gut, allowing partially digested proteins and other compounds to slip into the bloodstream, triggering immune overreactions, worsening food intolerances, and amplifying allergic responses. Research even shows that diets high in omega-6 PUFAs can increase allergic reactivity to foods. But in addition to the improved fatty acid profile, conventional feed also introduces common allergens like soy proteins and residues from modern hybrid corn into the eggs and meat. Our custom formulated corn and soy-free feed eliminates these triggers completely. That's why our eggs, pork, and chicken aren't simply corn and soy free. They're entirely different foods, lower in inflammatory metabolism disrupting fats, free from feed-derived allergens, and often far easier on the gut and immune system for sensitive eaters. And the fifth benefit of corn and soy-free feed rations is less pesticide exposure. Pesticides contaminate the entire food chain. In conventional farming, they're sprayed heavily on grains, fruits, and vegetables. Now, these pesticide residues don't just simply disappear. They accumulate in the animal's fat, organs, and secretions, and ultimately in the food that we eat. Corn has been the single largest pesticide-treated crop in the US for decades, receiving roughly 39% of all pesticides applied to major crops as of the latest available data in 2019. Soybeans come in second, accounting for about 22% of total pesticide use. And herbicides dominate both crops' pesticide profiles. When animals consume these crops, the pesticides accumulate in their fat and tissues and ultimately in the food you consume. So by removing corn and soy from our feed and sourcing feed ingredients from our regenerative row crop farm partners, we reduce one of the hidden pathways of pesticide exposure in the modern diet. Clearly, corn and soy-free can make for a better food product, but here's the catch. It depends on what replaces them. Many corn and soy-free feeds simply swap these ingredients for other high-PUFA seeds and oils, like sunflower, canola, peanut, or flax. But these swaps don't solve the PUFA problem, they just repackage it, since all of those are high sources of PUFAs, which means the animals, and eventually you, are still consuming more of them. The result? Eggs and meat from corn and soy-free hens can still contain just as much PUFA as before, only now they carry a premium price tag. In other words, if the goal is to lower PUFAs, simply swapping corn and soy for other seed oils isn't the solution. I am a farmer now, but I didn't start here. My background is in mechanical engineering, and long before I stepped onto a farm, I spent countless hours studying human health, metabolism, and the role of dietary fats. That research changed how I view livestock feed and ultimately farming itself. When we started farming in 2021, our mission was simple: create the healthiest eggs possible. But the industry standard feeds, even the so-called corn and soy-free options, just weren't good enough. They didn't solve the deeper problems. So I custom formulated my own, not to chase a market trend, but to create a truly better product. My approach combines thousands of hours studying historical farming practices from the 1700s and 1800s, when chickens and animals thrived on diverse natural diets instead of industrial byproducts, with insights drawn from modern scientific research and peer-reviewed studies. Our goal is to produce metabolically supportive food our great-great-grandmothers would recognize, food that truly nourishes the body instead of silently degrading it. At Nourish, we're not just feeding animals differently, we're feeding humans differently. And we don't just talk about theory, we also test our products. Our fatty acid test results show significantly less PUFAs, more metabolism supporting saturated fat like stearic acid, and a higher saturated to PUFA ratio, which sends an entirely different metabolic signal to the body. Our eggs were also tested to contain negligible levels of phytoestrogens. We're not guessing, we're testing, and both the data and our customers' experiences confirm that this approach makes a real difference. We wanted to make this video because I strongly disagree with the idea that low PUFA and corn and soy free is just a trendy health movement. It's not a trend. It's a return. A return to the kinds of fats our ancestors ate. A return to foods that supported resilient metabolic health for generations. We're not here to ride the latest health wave. We're here to restore a food system that nourishes instead of depletes, reversing decades of metabolic harm caused by high PUFA, endocrine disrupting, pesticide-laden diets. We call this commitment our low P standard, food that is low in PUFAs, pesticides, and phytoestrogens, because these 3 Ps are silently weighing us down. I have a passion, or maybe an obsession, with fatty acids and how they impact human metabolism. I've seen firsthand how the wrong fats can slow us down, disrupt our hormones, and leave people wondering why they don't feel like themselves. So at Nourish, we've made it our mission to fix that by creating food that truly nourishes the way it used to. So if this resonates with you, we'd love for you to join us. The link to join the Nourish Food Club waitlist is below. Let's rebuild a food system that truly nourishes us from the inside out.